Welcome to the World United. Welcome to the World United.
Well, I'm Marbeth Dunn here on behalf of the World United and the Third World Spiritual Parliament, and I'm very blessed today to have with us Dr. John Demartini, the amazing Dr. John Demartini, a world-renowned expert on everything, and
That's an interesting intro, everything.
well, you are. I mean, if I ever have a question about anything, I know who to ask because you have the answer. So,
Human behavior, I might accept that, but when it comes to cell phones and car repairs, I don't know everything.
no, you're not the person for that. Definitely not. But today we're going to talk about collective consciousness, and I know you're an expert on that. So, why don't you tell us what is collective consciousness?
Okay. Well, first of all, since the time of, I believe, Emil Durkheim, he coined the term. And this goes back over a century ago. And it was the shared, common, collective beliefs, attitudes, moralities, ideas, paradigms of a collective group of people that was sometimes not limited to the whole world, but could be individualized into a national or a global or a state or a local. So a collective of a city, a collective of a state, collective of a thing was the shared beliefs and mores and traditions and conventions and belief systems and values, the axiosphere, as some people call it, of an individual society or the collective society from the world. Could be the world. Depends on who is writing about it and how it's applied. Carl Jung, on the other hand, saw it as what we would call now the epigenetic collection of belief systems that got inculcated into the consciousness of individual human beings from the subordination to the belief systems of the collective group society they were living in, that was ingrained as impulses and instincts in our subconscious mind. It was, in a sense, running our internal moralizations. So sometimes a collective consciousness was also called collective consciousness, conscience, which meant a moral construct, or conscious. And but ultimately it's the social collective value systems of a society, world. And some believe that it's now, because of the technology we have, sitting in the technosphere, sitting in the internet, that we're all able to access through internet, all the knowledge that's there collectively. And whoever has the highest power in a society impacts that. Value systems and belief systems and ideas tend to go from those who have the most power to those that have the least power in each area. For instance, if you're a collective consciousness of Catholicism, the Pope might have the overall views that the people follow. And if you're maybe a financial person, you might say Buffett might have that. If you're a mystic, you might have Sri Sri Ravi Shankar or some mystic that might have that collective input that people then follow the herd, you might say. So what's called a herd mentality, or you might say the crowd mentality or the social mentality, and whoever had the most power or the most influence within it tend to set the values and the belief systems and the attitudes that it gave rise to. And then many people subordinate and brain offload decisions onto these individuals and then incorporate them into their moralities and into their epigenetics and their subconscious behaviors. And so originally it was the collective. It has now esoteric components. Some esoteric writers are thinking of it as, ever since the time of Vladimir Vernadsky, who coined the term the noosphere, the sphere of the mind that surrounds the earth, and Chardin, who incorporated that into the phenomenon of man in 1955, it's now been conceived of as a field of consciousness that surrounds the earth that's now sitting in the internet that we access and tune into with Wikipedia and things, and all it's the collective belief systems and the dominant belief systems that are there that we can access. And some people tune in through a technology called the internet, and some people tune in by intuitive and more, I guess you could say, psychological means. But that has now been added on top of that since about the last 100 years.
So would you consider it also a collective subconscious?
Well, the way I define it, and if we're infatuated with somebody and we look up to them, we're conscious of the upsides and unconscious of their downsides. And we're impulsively drawn to them. And all of our associations that remind us of the things that they remind us of that is attractive, we pull in and we have these associations. We can get infatuated with them. And if we resent somebody and we look down on them morally, we are conscious of their downsides, unconscious of their upsides. So when we're actively engaging in a judgment and a perception, at the moment of perception, we can split our full consciousness into conscious and unconscious halves. And the moment we go on to the next one in our stream of consciousness, as William James says, moment by moment, that last judgment that was never neutralized and seen fully gets stored in the subconscious mind. And that gives rise to our reactions to things, and our this is good and this is bad, or this is attractive, this is repulsive, and is stored in our subconscious mind epigenetically and creates these impulses and instincts that we have that are collective. And this is the collective unconscious that Carl Jung was describing. We now call it epigenetics. And we now can go through multiple generations, and it can pass through generation after generation, these belief systems and these reactions. So the subconscious mind stores much of those moralities or those judgments and value systems that we impose or get inculcated. And that doesn't mean they're accurate and true, because Aristotle had a belief system, and Ptolemy in the first century believed that we had a geocentric system, even though Philolaus and Aristarchus said we had a heliocentric system. And that was believed from the time of Aristotle all the way through Neoplatonic times, and from the time of Ptolemy all the way till Copernicus, until Copernicus revolutionized it by reactivating Philolaus and Aristarchus. And then the heliocentric system. So the collective conscious was, we live on an earth and it's surrounded, and it's the center of the universe, and that was the belief system. Just because it's a belief system doesn't mean it's true. The collective consciousness can be just as subjective as many other things. But because a collective group buy it, that's what the people believe. And people that are actually standing up as unborrowed visionaries that are inspired with original ideas are up against the collective consciousness, because they have new insights and new understandings from research, and they usually get ridiculed and violently opposed so people can try to put them back into the box of the collective. And Ernest Becker, in his Denial of Death, wrote a fantastic book, a Pulitzer Prize-winning book, talking about the collective hero versus the individual hero. And the individual hero having to transcend the influence of the collective and create something original that serves humanity on a bigger and broader scale. Somebody has to be the misfit to do that, or otherwise we get stagnant.
So let's talk about meditation for a minute, and the thought that we are all one. Where does that fit into the collective consciousness?
Well, at the level of the essence of the soul in an essential self-philosophy, there's no distinction between self and other. This is a pre-mind, you might say, proto-mind, where what you perceive on the outside is a reflection of you, and there's no distinctions. But at the existential junction of the self, some people believe that from the soul to higher vibrations to the infinity of divinity is the essential essence of being, and down below is the existential becoming. And in this existential world, we divide things into self versus other than self, and we differentiate things by self and other, and similars and differences, and we judge. And when we do that, we automatically, in a sense, weigh ourselves down with these judgments and store in our subconscious mind instead of wake up our superconscious mind, which transcends that. And meditation, if not used as an escape, which some is, but is used to integrate and to be really fully conscious and to be really present, can transcend the collective conscious limitations and moral structures and see things as they are, where nothing's missing. At the level of the essence of the soul, nothing's missing in us. At the level of the existence of the senses, things appear to be missing in us. The things that appear to be missing in us are the things we're too proud to admit, what we see in others that we deflect, or the things we're too humble to admit, that we are infatuated with others that we're too humble to admit that we deflect. And all these disowned parts and this dismemberment and this deflective awareness weighs us down into the subconscious and stores down there in these impulses and instincts like an animal, instead of transcending it. And meditation, if used wisely, can help us transcend that and actually add and contribute to the new polarity, new transcendent awareness into the collective consciousness. So an individual has the capacity to influence the collective consciousness through truly integrative means of meditation, or any tool that allows them to integrate the pairs of opposites in their mind and transcend the judgments that are trapping them in the moral vicissitudes of the previous collective, you might say, limited thinking.
Beautiful. So with the World United, we'll be having a multi-million people meditation in December. And how do you think that can affect the collective consciousness?
Well, the most power we as an individual have is our authentic self. And the authentic self is not disowning parts by being proud or shamed, but by love. So if each individual truly transcended the judgments for a moment in a meditation and contributed a state beyond the pairs of opposites in a moment of grace, and they did that, there's a non-local quantum entangled impact from that has no boundary. I've stood in front of 11,000 people, 8,000 people, 10,000 people many times, and got into that state with real presence. And then the entire room is in tears of gratitude. There's grace. And I'm just the one individual in front of 10 or 11,000 people. And if all of a sudden I can do that in a state of grace and have that presence and have that impact, that whole room joins me in that collective. In a sense, I'm being honored, because every human being yearns to want to express authenticity in that grace state and to be loved and appreciated for who they are. If we actually demonstrate and exemplify that for just a moment in presence, and did that on collective seated areas of the world with one primary focus for the one moment, that has a ripple effect and a non-locally entangled effect just by the same as my room when I'm in front of 10,000 people. And that, I don't know what the boundary is. The Participatory Universe by John Archibald Wheeler, everything is connected and there's nothing not entangled. And if you impact by being present, you impact the whole. Arthur Eddington said, when the electron vibrates, the universe shakes. So if we actually go to a state of grace, we have an impact on people around us. And our own authenticity and inspiration is probably the wisest thing we could be doing. And living by priority and objectively and with equanimity is the greatest contribution we can make on the planet. If we do it collectively, we impact a collective consciousness.
So the Course in Miracles tells us that there's no such thing as an idle thought, and our thoughts have power. So how do our thoughts affect this unified consciousness?
Well, the old saying is, there's a new movie out, as you've probably seen, How Thoughts Become Things, and I got to be participating in that. But your innermost dominant thought does become your outermost tangible reality, primarily because the way the filtering mechanism of the pulvinar nuclei on the brain, it's a filtering and gating mechanism, and whatever we think about, we literally filter our perceptions and spot things that relate to it. We tend to make decisions that are more congruent with it, and we tend to take actions that are more likely to achieve it. So by thinking about the way we would love our life to be and the way we'd love the world to be, we increase the probability of actually acting in a way that enhances that probability, probabilistically. And then by the ripple effect and the entanglement effect, we impact the people who we touch. And so whoever has the most certainty and the most presence and the least volatility is the one that's going to lead the way in what impacts the collective consciousness and impacts the planet. So yeah, whoever is the most present, the most authentic, and the most, in a sense, inspired has the power to impact people. Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, said, don't ever underestimate the significance of a small group of people for changing the world. It's the only thing that ever did. Somebody with an idea who was inspired, that was relentless in the pursuit of expressing it and bringing their vision and their message to the world with a new paradigm, is the one that changed the world.
Well, I totally believe that, that we can affect the world, especially when we meet with people on a higher elevated state and come from a place of love and unity. So how would you suggest that we do this as individuals?
Well, the greatest exemplification, the greatest teacher's exemplification, the greatest exemplification is authenticity. And the greatest authenticity is to live by highest priority. When I've done value determination on thousands of people around the world, their highest value expresses their most authentic self. Like, my highest value is teaching, and I'm a teacher. So whatever is highest on our value is what our identity revolves around. And so when we live congruently by our highest value, which is most spontaneously inspiring within, we access that state that has the greatest impact. And because every human being yearns to be authentic, whether they're conscious or not, when you demonstrate that and you give permission for others to do the same, they're magnetized and drawn automatically. And if you can perceive or create a way of presenting what it is that's inspiring to you in a way that serves other people, they feel it's almost like a charismatic effect on their life, because they're feeling that they're being fulfilled by an authentic person, and they're drawn to that. And then they enhance, because people, places, things, ideas, and events synchronize with somebody who's authentic. So an individual that can do that with a heart open, doing what they love and the service that they want to do, it's a profound ripple effect on the planet. So I think that's how we do it, just by living by priority and authentically, according to what's really valuable, delegating lower priority things, sticking to what's highest in priority, which raises our own vibrations and allows us to have the greatest influence, because people want to live authentically. They want to live and be loved for who they are. If we love who we are, if we're infatuated looking down on people and they're arrogant looking down on people, and we're not being ourselves, and we're exaggerating ourselves, or we're minimizing ourselves and looking up at people, as long as people are on pedestals and pits and not in our heart, we're not being authentic and we're not exemplifying it. But having a moment of unconditional love for people in the world has an impact, and people want to be loved that way, and they see somebody living that way, they're drawn to them. And so we have automatic an influence, and we have the greatest influence to the degree that we're authentic, and we have the most love effect when we're actually in love with ourselves and the world around us, and not trying to be somebody we're not.
I love this. I just have one more question before we close. So if we relinquish judgment and we don't become infatuated or projecting our judgment on others, whether we're worshiping them as being elevated or looking down at them as being less, and we relinquish that judgment, is that something that will propel us into this higher elevated consciousness?
Well, you know that. Absolutely. If you put people on pedestals or pits, you don't get to put them in your hearts. And until you put them in the hearts, see, nothing's missing in us. I was in Nepal one time. I was chatting with the Bonpo Lama. And the Bonpo Lama used to be the lineage that ran Tibet, and was a massive influence before the Dalai Lama even came about, before even heard of. And the Bonpo Lama and I had a nice chat about the illusions of missingness. Nothing's missing. Nothing. We just have a perception. What happens is we minimize ourselves to others we put on pedestals. We inject their values from the collective. We then expect ourselves to live outside our own values and be unauthentic. And then we wonder why we can't live their values. It's like a cat wishing it could swim like a fish, or a fish wishing it could climb like a cat. We then self-depreciate ourselves. Then we offload our opinions and offload things onto other people. So we become part of the collective sheep instead of the shepherd. We lose our authenticity. We lose our pathway. We become a borrowed visionary instead of an unborrowed visionary. And it doesn't give you the power to influence and be influenced. So it's what really matters is not putting people on pedestals or pits, but putting people in hearts. And that occurs most resiliently and most adaptively when we're living by highest priority and being the most authentic us, where we are spontaneously inspired to do and be and have what we really feel in our heart we want to do. That's where our innermost dominant thought becomes the power to create our outermost tangible reality.
Oh, that's really beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Demartini. We so appreciate your taking the time and sharing your beautiful wisdom with us today.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.